So hello, for those who don't know who I am, my name is James Harvey. I run an organisation called Students Against Tyranny. In 2021, I founded this organisation originally as a social group for like-minded young people so they could meet and not feel the societal pressures to get a lot of them were facing pressures from their families, from their friends, from their teachers, from the government, from the media. And so I originally founded it as a social group. It has since transpired into an activism movement of young people who oppose institutionalised Marxism and the shutdown of free speech within universities. Now, as interesting as this sounds, I can already tell what you're thinking. Why should this concern you? Too many young people are going to university, studying Mickey Mouse courses, and being indoctrinated into a culture of left-wing progressive politics. This is fortified by a report from the Adam Smith Institute, which found 1810 university lecturers to be left-wing. I inherently believe that universities are ground zero for communist regimes. I believe that the UK has been undergoing a cultural shift to a communist infrastructure for quite a few years. And university students are being manipulated and used for this agenda. And as I will show you, manipulation, propaganda, and students are one of the ways Marxist takeovers are achieved. We have organised protests in London, in Manchester, in Swansea, and so many other places. Now, where do you think this picture was taken? To anyone, this would look like a picture from China, the Cultural Revolution in China, led by Mao Zedong. But this was taken in the UK, literally a couple of weeks ago, as the lefties protested against the Tory conference. This is the YCL, the Young Communist League, and there's about 550 of them here in the UK. In the UK, openly advocating for communism, like it's a good idea. Now, we've got to ask the question, if the economic beliefs contained within socialism, communism, and Marxism have never been proven to have ever worked, why do students still actively fight for this ideology, and why are they so radical in doing so? Whether you want to talk about the Khmer Rouge, Communist China, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, there are many other Marx-inspired revolutions. They all have the same thing in common, with the exception of the Khmer Rouge. They all recruit the work of the students, every single one of them. Whether that be to disseminate propaganda, form paramilitary groups and organisations, and even beat their own teachers to death. Now, why did I say the exception of the Khmer Rouge? They actually imprisoned students, but they used other students in order to achieve that, to do that, basically pitting them against each other. And before continuing and explaining why I believe that young people are so susceptible to Marx-inspired ideals, I do want to take a brief kind of trip through history to explain why it's so important and why this is an issue we need to fight now. So this was the Bolshevik Revolution, which the Bolsheviks were a faction within the Russian wing, within the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party, which occurred between 1917 and 1923. This is control of the Russian government in October 1917, which was also dubbed Red October, and this was all done under the control of Vladimir Putin. Now, they exposed students through universities to revolutionary ideals, including the work of Karl Marx and Lenin. Students were attracted to the Bolsheviks' promise of the redistribution of land, as well as the proletariat's control and an end to the war, in reference to Russia's involvement in World War I. Now, students also formed the core of a paramilitary organisation called the Red Guard, who helped secure key locations such as government buildings and railway stations. You then got the 1959 Cuban Revolution, which was led by Fidel Castro. Students were once again recruited in the distribution of propaganda materials, primarily pamphlets and newspapers. Students were also involved in the armed fight against Bastia's forces, Porfirio Castilla was the democratically elected president at the time. Che Guevara, who many of you may know, was a Cuban medical student who became the most famous student revolutionary to ever exist during this insurrection. After Castro seized control of Cuba, student intellectuals became heavily involved in reforming the education system, entirely propagandizing it, and helping to build a new social heteronomy. Now, this ties in with ideological subversions, which we'll get into that in a moment, to do with Yuri Bezmenov. But essentially, however, taking over the education system, completely reforming it, is typically an extremely crucial step, as a lot of Marxists take when pushing for the revolution. They also get rid of critical thinking, also softening the curriculum, and pumping out propaganda through textbooks. The Nazis did exactly the same thing, and a lot of Marxist-inspired revolutions also did it. So moving on to Mao's Cultural Revolution, which is one of the most famous ones, which took place between 1966 and 1976. The idea was to completely destroy Chinese culture and create what they called the Year Zero. Students were encouraged to denounce and physically attack so-called authority figures who were separated into 5 black categories. These were landlords, rich farmers, counter-revolutionaries, bad influences, and right-wingers. Teachers were killed for being what they called capitalist intellectuals, who they deemed were counter-revolutionaries. People within these 5 black categories were beaten, humiliated, re-educated, persecuted, and went through struggle sessions. Now, if anyone doesn't know what a struggle session was, it was basically where you were beaten, humiliated, or whatever by someone with rich or close connection. For example, students would beat and publicly humiliate their teachers for being capitalist intellectuals. This is the kind of ideology that's being taught to young people in schools. It's being promoted to young people in schools. It's being promoted through the student unions, through student organisations, through student newspapers. This is the ideology our young people are looking up to. Now, I could quite literally stand here all day and give examples, but unfortunately I don't have the time. Now, Yuri Bezmenov, quite a famous name, was a KGB propaganda agent who defected to Canada. After leaving the KGB, he began to write books from an anti-communist position. Now, he coined a term called ideological subversion, which, as you can see, ideological subversions, or psychological warfare, changes the perception of reality to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, no one is able to come to a sensible conclusion in the interest of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. A perfect example of this would be trans ideologies. So even after facing an abundance of evidence that you cannot change your gender, the far left, still neglect to believe that this is the case. And as you can see as well, for school students, Trinity College, communist. So another quote from Yuri Bezmenov is, "We would snow out editorial offices, student organisations, religious groups with literature, class struggle, propaganda." Something else he did was kind of snowplow student organisations with real aspirations for the working class, so betterment of life, equality, etc. And as you can see, this is exactly what's going on. This is a KGB propaganda agent who's talking about this. He was talking about this, 30, 40 years ago. And this is exactly what is happening. He warned the West of what was coming, and lo and behold, we're seeing exactly that. And I mean, just take a look at Genera's student union, who most likely has a president from the Socialist Worker Party. And the literature they pump out. So this is the kind of stuff they pump out. So this is from Bradford Student Union. So I actually had an experience here. We've organised an event at Bradford Student Union before. One of our members, along with Piers Corbyn, went there to listen to students, and the police were called to them, right? And we were told that we needed to get permission from a club within a student union in order to be there, right? So we had to look through the list of what has been offered at the student union. They had no debate in society, no free speech society, no conservative society, not even the UKIP society, right? They had nothing. Everything there was like Afghanistan society, LGBT society, all very left-wing intersectionality style stuff. There was nothing there about free speech, about democratic rights, absolutely nothing. And this is from Bristol Student Union. Outrage as Hawke students banned army from UK University in absurd plot to disarm campus. Right. So, Bristol Student Union willing to ban the army from setting up a school at the campus because they want to disarm it, but they're more than willing to have shrines to Marx there, or Stalin, who are mass murderers who have, well, body counts in the hundreds of millions, but that's completely fine. You just can't have the army there. Right, got it. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so, anyway, there are 4 stages of ideological subversion that Besman I've talked about. So you've got demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization. A bit comparable to problem, reaction, solution. So as you can see from demoralization there, educate an entire generation in Marxist ideology. Besman I've actually talked about this. So it takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation, remove their morals, their values, their ethics. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years it requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy. They skip a generation. That's how communist regimes work, and that's exactly what's going on in the West. If you go to university these days, none of them have any morals, values, or ethics. If you have an opinion that's slightly different from them, you're immediately far right. I've had many of them come out against me in Swansea, protesting against me because I'm a far right Nazi. We've all heard it before. Just because I believe that the UK, that we should close our borders, that we should have control over our borders, that we shouldn't have a foreign body like the World Economic Forum or the United Nations or anything like that have control of what's going on in the UK. So there are many examples of demoralisation within the West. We've got encouraging obesity, encouraging promiscuity, not therapeutically treating gender dysphoria, and letting biological men enter women's sports and prisons. And some are even openly advocating for pedophilia to become a protected LGBTQ characteristic. Antifa, which all of you are definitely aware of, are a student-run terrorist organisation that tear down statues, advocate for communist ideals, which, as I said earlier, are responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths. And this is a massive example of demoralisation. So communists typically unionise everything and then control all the unions. And the reason I wanted to mention that is because of my university situation. I've actually been kicked out now. So originally, I don't know what anyone's thoughts is on this, but they actually brought up a picture on the screen. Now, by the way, I do film and TV, right? I do film and TV, that's all I do. And they brought up a picture on the screen of a Hindu woman who stands up to a member of the EDL. Now, all I did was take a quick video of this to post on my social media so I could show you exactly what we were being taught. In response to this, I was pulled into a disciplinary meeting and subsequently punished because I was showing you exactly what we were being taught. And by the way, it wasn't around legal representation. So I actually went to work for the England Union, who Robin Tilbrook obviously runs, and Niall McRae came to represent me. And my university said, you're not allowed to have him. You're only allowed to have someone from the student union. This is the same student union that are run by communists who have openly stated they hate me, right? And I'm meant to get one of them to, fairly represent me. How does that work? It doesn't. And I get phone calls all the time from people who are being punished or kicked out of their university for one thing. All the time. And I've got a friend at the moment in a liberal arts college in London who now is dealing with threats from Antifa to stab him because he came out and said LGBT should not be pushed to children. This is the kind of ideology we are dealing with. As I said, through film and TV, I've learned about, in film and TV lessons, I'm learning about climate change, I'm learning about socialism, I'm learning about anti-Trump opinions, Well, this is the kind of stuff they're teaching to young people. My university isn't even that woke. Now imagine what they're teaching at, I don't know, Oxford University, where you're not even allowed to misgender a student, or you get kicked out. It's just absolutely abhorrent. And university, I've never advocated against woke culture on campus, never. What I've said is it should be politically balanced. Universities are meant to be bastions of free speech and a place where you discover new ideas, new concepts. It means people who go to universities are meant to dictate our socio-economic policies in the next few years. If they're learning about communism, then the UK is heading down a very, very dark path, if they're not hearing any counter opinions. Now, universities across the UK, they fly LGBTQ flags, but when you say openly in class that there are only two genders, you can get expelled for it. Like James Harvey, or Luca, or even John Christian, of which I've organised protests for in Manchester multiple times, faced massive opposition from Antifa and the far left. I've had councillors come out, so I've had news after news article, hippies after hippies about it, because we're advocating for his rights. Now, really quickly, before I mention this, we do have some good news regarding Luca, who was kicked out for transphobia. We are taking Godalming Sixth Form College to court. The deputy head teacher is actually being fired in response to us taking him to court. So we are trying to do what we can to fight against woke ideologies on campus. Thank you. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time to go through the entire John Christian story. It is a very long and deep, and this is a very in-depth article on it. So if you do want to read it, head over to urbanscoop.news, how Manchester University conspired against a non-woke student. It's a really interesting article, and it kind of gives a brief underline of what's going on in universities, where teachers are conspiring with students to have a student kicked out. That's what's going on. Not only are we dealing with the demoralisation of the West, especially among universities, we also have universities limiting the amount of words their pupils and teachers can use. So this is an inclusive language guide from the University of Surrey. You're not allowed to say black sheep, black ball, black box, black mark, black Friday, black and blue, dark side, dark web, fair, Indian summer, or frozen shade. You couldn't make it up, could you? These are the banned words from the University of Surrey because they're not inclusive enough. You have to replace them with, like, for example, instead of saying black and blue, say bruised. It's like 1984 fashion, isn't it? Where they're trying to limit the amount of words that people can use so you don't have free thoughts. That's kind of what's going on here. And, I mean, ironically, if anyone's read any of Karl Marx's work, big fan, he's written about a concept he calls historical materialism. And historical materialism, in his mind, is where you have a movement that encapsulates historical consciousness so that mistakes of the past aren't repeated. That's the basic premise of historical materialism. Now, if the far left, who are Marxists, who admit they're Marxists, still upheld that belief, then why are they removing words? Why are they tearing down statues? That's because historical materialism doesn't work. What you have as a direct result of historical materialism is a movement that silences opposition through violence and labels. How does that make sense? So the reason a high percentile of students are socialist, communist, or Marxist is because they are overly naive and idealistic. That's just the basics of it, isn't it? They are more prone to adopting radical political beliefs on both sides of the political spectrum. This isn't just on the far left. Young people having a naive and idealistic worldview tend to favour political ideologies depending on their moral instinct. Socialism, because it's considered pro-working class, tends to illustrate more moral luminescence than any other ideology such as conservatism. This is also why students are typically more radical when it comes to gender-affirming care and BLM. They buy into the idea of leftism being morally superior, when we know the exact opposite is the truth. Let me ask you a question, right? Is it more moral to feed into someone's delusion, even when it could cost them their life, their mental health? You know, we're talking about trans ideologies here. Or is it more moral to tell them to the face, no, you can't be a woman, you can't chop your penis off, which could save their life, because statistically we know after these operations, after these trans operations, for around 7 years, they are way more statistically likely to commit suicide. Now, because they favour political ideologies dependent on their moral instincts, they tend to be naive and pick the ideologies which in a perfect world would work, but we don't live in that world. Like Marx's theory of surplus of value. It has no place in the real world. And as I said, you know, propaganda plays into this massively. Student organisations, student unions are pumping out propaganda, Marxist literature to young people. And they're buying into it because they're naive. They believe everything they read. Marxism is far more radical than any other left-wing ideology. And as is evident throughout history, it's authoritarian by nature. Once people have adopted an authoritarian ideology, they become radicalised, and radical in how they approach fighting for their belief. This is mainly due to the mounting anger resulting from their unfulfilled objectives, coupled with the apparent lack of progress in the political shift they are attempting to press towards. In their minds, this radical belief is the only way they can save the UK, unless their goal is urgent, which is why a violent revolution is needed. So, this is Marxism Festival of Socialist Ideas. They hold it once a year at Solway University of London. I think they were banned for quite a few years because of some rape scandal involving the organisers of this event. But regardless of that, Turning Point actually went there and a few of them actually got really badly beaten and ended up in hospital because of Antifa. But students are learning about all I've just talked about, including paramilitary organisations like the Red Guards. At this annual event at SOS, and they're taking inspiration from such groups. So they're not learning that they were bad or learning about the negative consequences of the actions that were caused. They're learning that these people are ones we need to look up to, that these paramilitary groups are ones we should strive towards, that we should strive for this violent communist revolution that's going to make everyone starve equally, because that's the only equality it brings, the equality of starvation. Now, so as Students Against Tyranny, we've been doing as much as we can to oppose all of this and more for the past 2.5 years. And recently we launched a campaign called Campus Debates. Now I know Debbie Hicks is coming later to speak, she's actually involved in our first ever episode of it. So we went up to Oxford University, where you've got 15-minute cities, that has actually been led out of the university. They're the ones who created it, pushed for it with the students. And what we did is we set up a table outside. Now, if anyone knows who Paul Burgess is, if you don't know who he is, he's a climate expert. He does a YouTube channel called Climate Realism by Paul Burgess. Absolutely great guy. And we set up a table outside Oxford University with a banner that said, "Green energy is unworkable and unaffordable, change my mind." And we sat down students to debate it. And it was a great day, absolutely fantastic. You can find the video on my channel on YouTube, Students Against Tyranny. And we want to do more of this. We've got a Feminism is Toxic one that's coming out next month with Serena Macker, who's the rational female on YouTube. And so, yeah, we're doing a lot to bring back the values of free speech to universities. We're trying to get in contact with the first ever University Free Speech Tussar, who's Arif Ahmed. We've got the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill that's just gone through. That would mean that officers students should be able to levy fines against institutions that infringe on their students' rights to free speech. However, we're not seeing that at the moment. We still have students kicked out, so we're usually meeting with him. So if anyone could get him a message, that'd be greatly appreciated. And also, if you are a young person watching at home, please join Students Against Tyranny. But if you don't, now, final words here, if you don't stop the violent communist ideals currently plaguing university campuses, where students now think it's okay to run around shutting down opinions they dislike while looking up to genocidal maniacs like Stalin and Mao. then things are only going to get worse when those same people enter politics. We need to cut the tap off at the source. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Very informative. And as I said when I introduced him, it's great to see that there are young people that are willing to take a fight against the establishment. And power to him, and long may it continue.